Samwise Gamgee is a low-to-the-ground commander only costing you a green and a white. He is a 2/2 halfling peasant that reads whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, create a food token. He has another ability that says sacrifice 3 foods, return target historic card from your graveyard to your hand. If you like ramp, card draw, and casting lots of spells, then this is the deck for you.
Sounds good to me.
If you don't like keeping up with triggers, then not so much.
I feel triggered.
So to get this journey started, let's begin with our ramp.
Pow, 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 pow.
We're going to start off with the Delighted Halfling because we want mana dorks. We're talking no rampant growth, no arcane signet, and no soul ring. That's right, no soul ring because we want those ETB triggers from the creatures. That stands for enter the battlefield. And Delighted Halfling is perfect. Not only does she come in before our commander, but she can make sure that he doesn't get countered. And she's not our only one drop. We got Birds of Paradise, Avacyn's Pilgrim, and of course, Llanowar Elves. And my favorite, Gilded Goose, which brings in its own food token. With our commander out, 2 foods. But by far, the best ramp in this deck is Jaheira, Friend of the Forest.
Jaheira.
I mean, the whole reason we want all these low mana creatures to come into play is to trigger our commander and get these food tokens. And Jaheira will turn all those food tokens into green mana rocks. So we got our ramp covered. Now what about card draw?
Let's draw some cards.
First thing we want to take advantage of is all those creatures entering the battlefield. Guardian Project will do just that. We have over 40 creatures in this deck, and every time one of them enters the battlefield, our commander gives us a food, and Guardian Project will draw us a card. Beast Whisperer gives us a similar effect, but this one's on cast, so even if it's countered, we're still going to draw the card. Mentor the Meek, Esper Sentinel, and my boy Benny Brax all trigger the commander and give us great value in this deck. You can kind of see a theme here. Cast lots of creatures, make lots of food, draw lots of cards. So we got our mana, we got our ramp. What does this deck really want to do? We want to make food tokens and abuse them. So let's make some food. The first card we're looking at is Peregrine Took. This dude is an all-star in this deck. Anytime you would make 1 or more tokens, you make an additional food. Doesn't matter if it's a creature, a treasure, or another food. And then you can sacrifice 3 foods to draw a card, which is huge.
Huge.
If I didn't want access to white, he would be my commander. Next up is William Poney. When William Poney enters the battlefield, create 2 food tokens. With your commander out, he's making 3. Also, you can sacrifice a food at will, and in this deck, that actually comes into play quite a bit. And besides, look at him. I mean, look at him. Any excuse to play this card is a good excuse. Next up is Eleanor Gardner. Not only does she bring in a food, but she has a really cool effect where at the beginning of your end step, if you sacrifice a food, you get to search your library for a basic land. So for almost nothing, you get to ramp a growth on every one of your turns. Not to mention that all 3 of these cards I just said are legendary creatures. That means that with your commander, because they're historic, you can bring them back from the graveyard to your hand.
Recursion is good.
There are plenty cards in this deck that will get you food, but the last one I want to talk about is Treebeard Gracious Host. Not only does this dude bring food to the barbecue, but he also gives you something to do with it. Anytime you crack food for 3 life, you get to put 3 1/1 counters on any target halfling or tree folk you want. Now, when you combine that with Sam, Loyal Attendant, you're paying 1 mana to gain 3 life and put 3 1/1 counters on any halfling or tree folk you want. Not just your own. Now, when you combine these creatures with cards like Parallel Lives, Panharmonicon, and Second Harvest, we can truly have ourselves a feast. Biblical proportions of food multiplication.
Wow.
I know, it's crazy, but what are we going to do with all this food? Well, it's time for the MVC.
MVC?
Most Valuable Card. Academy Manufacturer gives us so much value. Clue, foods, Treasures, this gives us the mana to keep casting all those small CMC creatures. And they create more foods, and more clues, and more treasures. And we can cast more creatures, which create more food, more clues, more treasures. It gets insane. You get to chain into these crazy turns, where you end up with half of your library played out on your battlefield, and 50 to 100 food that you gotta figure out what to do with. But thankfully for you, I'm here, and I can tell you exactly what to do with them.
See, thank you.
You are welcome. Now check out these Wincons.
Wincons!
Sure, you can be boring and win with Aetherflux Reservoir, but why not go to combat with Blossoming Bogbeast? Whenever Blossoming Bogbeast attacks, you gain 2 life, then creatures you control gain trample and get +X until end of turn, where X is the amount of life you've gained this turn. It's time to turn each of those food tokens into an overrun. And with Sam Loyal Attendant and Prize Pig, you basically have to crack them for free. Now you're overrunning your friends with your once tiny and useless hobbits. I mean, who could be mad at dying like that? And speaking of big fat hobbits, here comes the big boy of my deck.
Big boy!
Feasting Hobbit. For 2 mana. 2 stinking mana. This dude has Devour Food 3. All that food we created, each one he devours, he gets 3 1/1 counters. And then creatures with power less than Feasting Hobbit can't block it. Last time I played this card, I got him up to 101, and had 20 food left over just in case. This deck was such a pleasant surprise. I put it together to be silly, halflings and food, but wizards managed to make food tokens good.
Really good.
Samwise Gamgee is a really fun deck and a really good commander. I'm definitely putting this to paper. I love this deck. But as always, don't take my word for it. I'll put a link to Moxfield down below. Go try it out for yourself. I'll post some gameplays that we streamed with it. But if you're still here listening, I just want to say thank you for letting me share my decks with you. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, embrace the chaos.